look at what's going on in our industry today, we're pushing the envelope with things in terms of our seed genetics. We're pushing population. We're getting in a position where we have genetics that the rind on that corn plant, that stalk, is tougher. The pith is not decaying as fast throughout the season. So what do? We take the steps to try to manage that. We'll go through and run a tillage pass. We're putting stalk chopping equipment on ahead. We're looking at ways to try to manage that residue better. What if you could make a pass with your combine that would accomplish that very step that you're after and also give you some other advantage? And that's where 360 chain roll comes into play. With regard to 360 chain roll, what you're looking at are the remnants that are left over here. I'll show you some differences. Behind me, we had a pass through the corn stalks with the combine. On your right, you're going to see both yield saver and 360 chain roll. And on your left, you're going to see the standard gathering chain or OEM gathering chain along with the standard stalk rolls. That particular piece of stubble is a result of a standard standard stalk roll. You look at what's happening with chain roll, we've splintered that stubble. That's that piece that's left there. In addition, we're looking at pieces of residue that are left like this in the OEM versus smaller pieces. If we can get it down to, say, a 6, 7, 8 inch piece of stalk, we're crimping that as we go through. We're opening this material up for it to have air and water enter, and we're able to get that microbial activity to begin break it down. Reality is we know that we've got three things going on for us. We have a lot more plant matter with which to work with, but within that plant matter we have nutrients. We've got N, P, and K and magnesium and so on, calcium, that are tied up inside of this plant material that if we can get it to be released and beneficial to our growing crop, all the better for us. And the sooner the better. But we also need to be able to manage the amount of material that we have out there. And from that standpoint, we also need to look at how we can come back in next spring. So we're preparing for our seed bed. So if we can make that pass, we can put 360 chain roll on your corn head and run through and be able to manage your stubble in a positive way, as well as break up some of the residue, break it down. Take a look at what we're looking at here. This happens to be beans planted. On the left, you see typical residue that comes in from a lot of our standard stalk rolls. On your right, see how the row cleaner has pushed some of that out of the way and allowed for a more clear pass with regard to where we're putting that seed in the ground. Chain roll is about sizing in a way that we have the ability with our row cleaner to kick that residue out of the way. It's also sized in a way that when we are receiving strong winds or we have water that's going to move residue from it, that these pieces have more likelihood to stay put. Contrast that to the scenario where we try to chop that and we get small confetti pieces. We got an opening on each end that allows air and water to get in, but we have a piece that's very susceptible to moving. And then the next step is that same little piece, if it stays around, we come back in at planting time. We may not be able to kick it out of the way and clear a path. We also may see it then get pushed down into the seed trench, get hairpinning. We minimize our ability for that plant to develop. We affect germination. We may delay germination or not let germination take place at all. So I mentioned talking about the nitrogen and the P and the K that are tied up inside of that. If we look at a typical 200 bushel type yield, what are we leaving? After we pull the grain off, we're seeing in the neighborhood of 90 pounds of nitrogen per acre left in the stover. We're seeing 30 plus pounds of our P left in the field and about 220 pounds of our potassium left in the field. From that standpoint, can we get that to release sooner by opening it up and letting microbial activity, that air and water get in, but microbial activity begin to break it down and make it available for us? We always talk about ROI. What's really the value of chain roll? And we look at it and think about what our gain is if we can improve our seed emergence and we can begin to capitalize on plants that are healthy and happy in there. Typically what I'd look at is about a 2 bushel difference. We'd probably see a couple of extra plants that are going to emerge as a result, and probably 2 bushel advantage over your chopping roll, that one that's going to make confetti pieces out of it. And if we can do the math on that, we can all come up with whatever we want on it from a standpoint of how many acres we're going to do. Let's say we do 1,500 acres. If we can get 2 bushels out of that, that's 3,000. Put 350 on that. Somebody do the math for me real quick. What's that come out to be? 35 times 3, 3.5 times 3,000 is going to give us what, $11,000 type scenario? To put chain roll on a head, let's take an 8-row head for example. It's just under $1,100 to put chain roll on per row. So we're looking at $10.90. If we ran 1,500 acres with our 8-row head, we're going to generate about $10.5 more in our revenue. The cost to upgrade that at $1,090 per row is just over $8,700. Your ROI in year 1 in that scenario is going to get you about 20% return there. That's just in the first year. If we don't believe in that 2 bushels and we knock that back, it might take more than 1 year to get to our final level. But the clear picture I would tell you is that we're back here and we're planting into some cleaner situations where we have the ability for our stock material to break down. One other key I want to mention here, you listen possibly to what they were talking about on the yield saver side. You see red flags on your right there identifying kernels that were dropped behind the yield savers. About 45 kernels were dropped in that scenario. Over here we were looking at 220 plus kernels that were dropped in the standard gathering chain. The value of 360 chain roll and 360 yield saver to your operation, saving kernels and then getting a chance to get the nutrients out of those stalks and get that stalk breakdown to take place. Any questions anybody can ask? Appreciate it, everybody.